What does it mean to be restless? Now, I don't want to assume that people are, okay? So if you're not, okay, that's okay, A lot of these topics that we're covering for the next few weeks, it's like, why am I not happy? Like, it assumes that a certain segment of our population feels that. So if you don't feel that, that's okay. Like, last week, I was talking to some people, they're like, why am I so unhappy? Should I be unhappy? I'm actually very happy. I said, yeah, that's okay. That's great. You're happy, so I don't think you need to force that out of you. I think it's just a way in which we can talk from God's perspective about some of the universal longings and felt needs of people out there. And so people out there, humanity, I think we all can resonate, or people can resonate with some of these topics. So today we're covering why am I so restless? And what do I mean by restless? I mean, I feel like I'm restless, but by that I mean just feeling like at times bouncing off the walls, like all this pent-up energy. But that's not the form of restlessness that I want to talk to you about today. The form of restlessness that I am referring to is this angst. And Nathan shared a little bit of that in his story, this angst that was inside of him, that was driving him to succeed. And so that gets manifested in an undercurrent of impatience and maybe even discontentment, or this perpetual feeling of, I'm not where I'm supposed to be. Do you ever feel that? Like, I'm not where I'm supposed to be right now, because of whether it's FOMO or and then you realize, once I get there, I realize I'm not supposed to be there either. It's just this sense that there's something that we feel we must do, but not really knowing what exactly that is. So I want to talk about restlessness and this angst, and for that, I wanted to cover the story of the prodigal son, and a lot of you know this story. It's from Luke chapter 15. You should have the handout. And although I'm not going to cover all the details of this story, but just to familiarize yourself with this story again, I'll give you just a minute and a half or so to read this with the person next to you. Okay, let's do that. If you don't know the person next to you, just introduce yourself. And then maybe just read out loud, just a couple verses at a time, and just let's understand this story once again. Let's do that. Looks like most of you are done. We'll get started then. How many of you are familiar with this story? Just so that I can get a sense of the audience, raise your hand if you are. Okay. Wow, a good number of you. Okay, so the prodigal son story, and it's really referring to the younger son, but actually one would argue it's also referring to the older son as well. We didn't read that portion, but we're not going to cover that today. Let me start with verse 12. It says, "And the younger of them said to his father, 'Father, give me the share of the property.'" Okay, so let me just... Give me the share of the property that is coming to me. And he divided his property between them. So at the outset, the younger son is impatient. He can't wait for his father to die, is essentially what that means, to get his inheritance. A terrible thing to wish upon anyone, much less your own dad. Talk about impatience, right? He can't wait until his father passes away so that he can get his inheritance. So he asks for it now. Now, impatience, I would argue, is one of the features of restlessness. So last week, if you were here last week, I talked about unhappiness. And one of the ways to talk about why a person is unhappy is a maladjustment to reality. If you're maladjusted to reality, you're unhappy. I think related to that, if you're maladjusted to time, you end up becoming restless. And so what do I mean by that? There is this internal clock in each of us, and time is ticking, and that time ticking is expressed in impatience. I used to walk down the stairs rather than take the elevator at the apartment I used to live in Cambridge. Many of us live there at KBL because the elevator's so slow. And going from 4th floor to 1st, I could read like a couple articles on the way down. So I said, I can't do this. I don't know if you've ever felt like impatience waiting in line at the supermarket. Like, oh my gosh, like I got to just go do the self-checkout, like it's just, there's something about our maladjustment to time in the sense that we feel like we don't have a whole lot of time. That is one of the features of restlessness. Someone has said, I like the way this person phrased it, impatience is a protest against mortality. Knowing that you're going to die one day, and I don't want to be morbid here, but knowing that we're all going to die one day, and here you are, a lot of you young, and I don't know if you actually feel this way, but I'm 20 years old, and I can't believe I haven't started my own company, and I haven't gone IPO with it, and have all these stock options, and it's made my millions. I don't know if you actually feel that way. Maybe you're the type to say, man, I wish I would go experience the world or even the United States. There's a person that I met, my wife Sunny and I met at the airport last week, and he was just on the plane leaving Massachusetts because he had visited something like 46 out of the 50 states. So he was taking vacation, another PTO, to visit Massachusetts. And so now he had 4 more to go, and I don't remember. I know Wyoming was one of them. Montana hadn't gone there, and there was a couple others. But yeah, like maybe you're that type. I need to explore the world. You've got that wanderlust, like I need to go to places. And there is that sense of I need to do something. Yeah, impatience is a protest against mortality, because why would we feel that if we live forever, right? So trying to win against the ticking time by trying to be everywhere, trying to do many things all at the same time, that's where a part of our restlessness comes from. And so there doesn't seem to be a shortage of possibilities either. Because people say, you know what? You should go have all the fun you want in life. And so you're like, yes, it's all about fun. Life is about fun. And now we have the opportunities to experience that fun in today's day and age. And somebody says, oh no, but I think life is about finding that special someone, like in that video, like that romance part. And another person says, no, it's all about making a name for yourself. And maybe the nihilist says, no, it's none of those things. Just despair and die, But here's the thing. People are guessing when they give you advice on how you should live. Because, and I think we tend to take comfort in numbers because everyone seems to be doing this thing. We just sort of go along with it. But if you actually are thoughtful about it, do people know where they're going or where they're headed? And because sometimes, some of us, passively receive that, we don't have a whole lot of ownership when it comes to our own lives. And so somewhere along the way, we end up living this trial and error type of life. Our restless hearts take us one direction. We go, I was hoping that would stick, and it doesn't. And then we throw ourselves at something else, and we hope that would stick, and it doesn't. And so we rest, we wash, we repeat that whole line in that video. And the sad subtext of many people's lives is that you try this or that, and then suddenly your life is like 80 years have passed. And at that point, you have this sinking feeling. My mom used to tell me this, and there's a Korean word for it. It's called han, and it's like this perpetual feeling of regret that you didn't live a certain way, or you didn't find the right way to live, and now you've wasted it. And so you could see why a person would feel restless, and they end up doing something, and then they end up, oh my gosh, what happened to my life? So it's that whole story. So going back to the prodigal son, notice what he does. He says, not many days later, the younger son gathered all he had and took a journey into a far country, and there he squandered his property in reckless living. So another feature of restlessness, one is impatience, but another, I would argue, is leaving. He left. It says he went on a journey into a far country. It's not nearby, because that wouldn't be cool, right? Just like next door. He went far away, and there he squandered his property in reckless living. Squandered it. That's a really important word here for us to identify. So he left. This idea that this current place is too small for me, or it's just a transitory pit stop on the way to something better and more interesting. Man, I feel like Boston is like kind of a city, just moving through, passing through. It's never been, like you can't, if you have this attitude, you can't savor the moment, because whatever that moment is, like right now, you're not here because you're imagining that level of excitement and fun is somewhere else. So you want to leave this place on the path toward another place that's more intriguing. But here's the problem. Like once you get there, so you suddenly get used to that place too. And then even the people you get used to, and now you have these boring features of life that characterize that future that's similar to the place that you just came from. Like, I don't know if you've already started to feel that, especially the new freshmen here. Like if you already start to get used to your environment, dining hall food, was it amazing? And now it's not so amazing, or maybe it wasn't ever amazing. It was just okay, and now it's even worse than okay. Maybe your roommates, they were so fascinating when you first met them. Hi, what's your name? Where are you from? My roommate was very fascinating. He was from Cyprus. His name, I still remember, my freshman year, Christos Hadji Georgiou, from Cyprus, math major. I said, wow, you're so cool. Never met somebody from Cyprus. He's my roommate now. And then after a while, we're getting on each other's nerves and stuff like that. And we still maintained our friendship, but you know how it goes. You end up getting used to people. You end up getting used to places. And so, like in the video, you settle in, get used to everything that's around you. I'm just quoting from the video now. Everything becomes automatic, routine, and every day it seems that almost instantly you wake up. Some days are exciting, new places to be, new things to see, new faces to meet. It all seems so new at first. Rest, wake up, wash, repeat. You've been there, you've done that. So restlessness involves leaving and discarding. But what happens when you end up relating to people that way is people become these temporary intrusions. And if you're a Christian, we often refer to such people as quote-unquote Lone Ranger Christians. And I understand that you may not know what that means or what that is referencing, but it's these individualistic Christians with no relational tethers to bind them. And this sense of then this personalized, individualized journey and destination through life, that Lone Ranger Christian is not the way that God views our life. Because God's goal, if you read Scripture, is to redeem us into a redemptive community, and therein lies definition and identity and a sense of richness and true peace. But restlessness will end up causing us to discard people because you're just too bored of the present and you're on a transitory pit stop, is what I said, on the way to some other destination. And what will end up happening is that you're going to get discarded because all the acquaintances were casual anyway. So what happens to this prodigal? He went out and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into his fields to feed pigs. And he was longing to be fed with the pods that the pigs ate, and no one gave him anything. There is no one to shepherd him back to restoration. What happened to all his friends? When he had the stuff, when he had money, at least he could offer them something. Could offer them rides and fancy cars, fine dining. But now they don't need him. And it's sad, but it's not surprising, right? We get this. Think of the level of commitment that is required to actually be there for someone in need. Genuine need. And our society is not built to support people who are in genuine need, because we're all on our individual privatized journey. And so whenever we find ourselves in need, that requires of that person a level of commitment to you that impinges on their autonomy and freedom. You see why that wouldn't work in today's age. So years ago, there was a book called Refrigerator Rights. And I like that title. It's this idea that I can come into your home and unannounced and without asking permission, open up your refrigerator and take some food. Now, you wouldn't call the police on me because normally that's what you would do, because the assumption there is I'm your friend. I just walked in unannounced and I said, and I just don't have to ask for whatever's in the refrigerator, and I just eat. And it's, in other words, it's that level of closeness. It's the level of closeness that I think only is nowadays only found in your own nuclear family. And so what happens when you're truly in need is you go to your family, but let's say your family's not there for you. Let's say you have a broken family, you don't even have that. Then where do you go when you have a chronic illness, or there is, you lost your job and you're in need? And so for this prodigal son, he lost everything. He's in dire need, and he's even wanting the food from the pigs. And it's not surprising that no one gave him anything. What he needed was the church. Not just any church, but an Acts 2 community, like the early church. When I say Acts 2, it's the community described in Acts chapter 2. And there's a portion of it I want to read for you. And they were selling their possessions. This is they, meaning the church, first church. They were selling their possessions and belongings and distributing the proceeds to all as any had need. As any had need. They were people with refrigerator rights. Because the early church behaved like a family, but not just any family, because, like I said, even in nuclear families, they're not designed to support us necessarily through every challenge of living life, but a community, really like an army of people who are supposed to be there for you when you are in need. And I really want to encourage all of us here to not see college as just some transitory pit stop. You're just sort of passing through. But man, personally, one of the best decisions I made in my life in college was I allowed people to claim me. And I moved toward others, so I claimed others. You're going to be somebody that's more than just a casual acquaintance. You are my brother in Christ, my sister in Christ. I allowed myself to be attached to this rich web of relationships in the church. And we aspire to be that community, which is why our network name is called Acts 2. We called it Acts 2 Network because we aspire to be Acts 2. We're not there yet, but we want to embody all of its principles and descriptions. And so some of you might have been invited to our homes this past week for dinners. How many of you actually went to one of our homes? Like, raise your hand if you were part of any of these. Okay, like some of you. All right. Okay, some of you are too shy to admit that. Well, you get, like I have pictures. So here's the pictures that of the different people who had dinner at our different homes. And this is not to say that we're meeting your need, but I'm sure we're meeting some need when we're inviting you to our homes. But this is how we've been for decades. Inviting what really it's like strangers, right? For now, into our homes, and where we really feel that what we want to cultivate is family, centered around the blessings that flow from God. And our experience is that when this happens, when there is this level of commitment with one another, and some of us have been friends, like me and my friends, my college friends have been friends for now, okay, man, just wrap your mind around this, over 30 years. Can you imagine, like, having a friend for that long? Like, the only friend category that you have now is like elementary school, right? Like, or high school. Like, I knew that friend for 4 years. Nowadays, it's not even from elementary to high school, right? But I've known people for over 30 years. But man, like, the blessings that flow from that level of community, because the church was God's ideas. And then I could tell you a lot of stories of how we met each other's needs through all the ups and downs. So that will be for another time. So going back to this prodigal son story, he had gotten to a point where he turns into a pig pretty much, because not only is he keeping pigs, but the pigs are eating better than he is. And again, I'm not saying that everybody with a restlessness ends up here, but there will be some crisis that will hit us in some form or another at some point in our lives. And a crisis hits this young man. And when he had spent everything, a severe famine arose in that country, and he began to be in need. Who would have anticipated that there would be not just an ordinary famine, a severe famine? And a severe famine, by definition, is rare. It's an unforeseen circumstance. Someone who works on, like, let's say, Wall Street, who graduates from a top flight business school, confident, and then the market suddenly crashes, and he could not have predicted, she could not have predicted that downturn in the market, these unpredictable outside forces, either like a downturn in the economy, or like a hurricane hits, or COVID, or something. No matter how we prepare, we have to acknowledge that this is a precarious world that we are living in. And this should humble us, which is a good thing. Because out of that felt need, it's an opportunity for us to come to our senses, like this prodigal son did, and consider God, maybe even for the first time. And so consequently, he begins to be in need, it says. And even though he started out, I'm sure, with a lot of promise and optimism, he didn't anticipate that a severe famine would hit. And then he ends up, it says, spending everything earlier, squandering everything. And I think theologically, this is the story of humanity. God created us to be in eternal relationship with him. But then out of our own rebellion, which is called sin, it causes us to leave God the Father, leave home, so to speak. We become restless. We become this restless wanderer until we experience deprivation. We become in need. And it's that larger story of humanity that's also depicted here in the story of the prodigal son. If we don't end up spending our lives in wild living like the prodigal son did, we will end up expending it in something. For what? You fill in the blank. What do you spend everything in? Your energies, your resources, your time, your money. we end up spending everything in something. And out of that something, it might be okay for a while, but from God's perspective, what you do with your life, if it ends up not connecting to Him, in other words, if it ends up not connecting to things of eternal value, it's like living in a pigsty. So why do we have this angst? Why do we have this restlessness? I think the Bible tells us that it stems from this kind of deep structure of reality. You know, like those longings that arise from when we first fall in love, or when we, I don't know if you had this experience, pick up a subject in school that really excites you. Have you had that, freshmen? Like, wow, this class is amazing. And you start to want to read it, forget the homework, you want to read it for itself, for learning. And then like that feeling that we have, that longing almost for something more, and then we realize that no marriage or no learning can really satisfy that longing. Like, then why does that longing exist? There's always something that we grasp at that first moment of longing that just fades away when reality hits, doesn't it? So it turns out the Bible says we're looking for something that ordinary life, our current terrestrial life can't give us. It's because God says it's true. We're meant for something more. That true life lies in another place beyond this world. Ecclesiastes 3:11 says, He has made everything beautiful in its time, and also He has put, it says, eternity into man's heart. That is what we are feeling. The prodigal son feels this in this passage. In verse 16, and he was longing to be fed with the pods that the pig ate, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he comes to himself. In other words, he has this thought. It's a very important thought. How many of my father's hired servants have more than enough bread, but I perish here with hunger? It's this reminder, it's this realization that says, I was not meant for this pigsty. I'm not supposed to be living like this pig. In other words, what Jesus is telling us is that we can have our animal, beastly existence, because maybe that's what the world tells us, is to live according to the naturalistic philosophy that we're just animals, and as long as we feed our appetites, we have fulfilled our destiny. But what this prodigal son does is it gives us a clue that right in the midst of that animal-like existence, it says he came to himself. He realized, wait a minute, I don't belong here. He has put eternity in the hearts of people, meaning we're not meant for this world. And it's because we're created in God's image. That is, we are created to be in fellowship with God, who is eternal, who is beyond time and space. And because of that, our restlessness is a sign at the fundamental level that we don't belong here. C.S. Lewis puts it this way. He says, if we find ourselves with a desire that nothing in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that we were made for another world. So the desire for elsewhere, the discontent at the way things are, it's by design, because we're not simply mortal. It turns out we're restless for eternity. We're not restless for stuff or experiences. We cannot be satisfied then ultimately with money or pleasure or fun and romance, with peak experiences and achievement at the highest level. They'll satisfy us for a while, but we're always going to be hungry, or we're going to be longing for something we can't get in this world, for something just beyond our grasp. And consequently, we're going to find life disappointing at some point. All of this is a signal from God. So I want to say, what is our response to that? What is your response to that? We can say, I haven't gotten it yet. I understand, Pastor, but it's still out there somewhere beneath the pale moonlight somewhere. Okay, anyway. And then, or you may say it doesn't exist, that happiness or whatever it is you're looking for. But I'm just going to live my life any way I see fit. In the words of this parable, we will end up having spent everything in either something destructive, like this prodigal son, or in something that everybody can see maybe as conventional living. But from God's perspective, it's never going to be satisfying. And so in Matthew 6:19, do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Isn't it interesting? Jesus divides this into natural forces and human forces. Thieves break in and steal. Moth, rust, and rust destroy. Natural and human, or whatever, or animal forces. This is what happens to all our treasures on earth. Eventually, something, some force will rob us, or other people will. And so, if you're going to invest in stuff it's going to slip through your fingers anyway. It makes us wonder, why am I studying? Why am I working so hard for this stuff that will rust? And to answer that, Jesus says, what is your treasure? He says, lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven then. It's important from God's perspective that our hearts are not wrapped around the stuff of this earth as like our treasures being on earth, which is only going to rust and decay. But our treasures are wrapped around that of eternity. So here's what I want to suggest that you do with your angst, to do with your restlessness. If you're not Christian, or you're Christian, it's the same message. Invest in eternity. Deep down, we all intuitively know that we're more than just flesh, which is why you guys are here on a Sunday, listening to me. You're wanting to invest in eternity, and you're on the right track. I want to affirm that. I say that you passionately invest in eternity by asking questions, talking to people who seem to have thought through this. Talk to Nathan, who just went through. Last week, Alyssa shared her story. I would even encourage you to pray, hello, God. It just seems that what is real is most tangible to me, but it also feels like it's not all of reality. So can you just show me whether or not you exist? If you are, in fact, the creator and you are personal, I'd like to know. And then to take steps to investigate that. Or if you are a Christian, if your eternity has been secured by God through Jesus Christ, and you have been reconciled to him, now you can lose yourself or be spent for the things of heaven. So you can actually be restless for things, but not in the way that we would translate into angst, but more like directed passion. And so in Romans 10, it says, and how are they to preach unless they are sent? As it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who preach the good news. Man, we can take that restless energy, we can invest it in eternity by investing in people. There are places in the world where they've never heard the gospel, and I just want us to pause and appreciate that. Never heard the gospel, never heard who Jesus is, never have opened up a page of the Bible. And so how are they to hear without someone preaching to them? It means somebody somewhere needs to be investing in people's souls. And how are they to preach unless they are sent? So I just want to end with this. As a church, we are really about sharing the gospel with our friends in our college context, in our youth context, wherever it is, even with little kids, wherever we go, sharing the gospel. We just saw a video recently of one of our churches where the kids are sharing the gospel with their friends on the bus, on the school bus. Like, that's amazing. Like, that DNA has gotten passed down to them. We as a church are focused on preaching to those people who have never heard. So I want to encourage and invite you. We're planning on foreign missions for the long haul. We've been planning that. That's where Sunny and I have been this past week, trying to plan for that. We're going to go to, we're planning for 2024 actually, and places, and here are the countries that we're actually looking to go to, and we're inviting you guys to potentially join in on these mission trips that are going to be about a couple weeks long. So can they hear the good news? Yeah, it's possible if we invest in eternity, because treasures aren't measured in degrees or dollars. It's people, because people last forever. So when our restlessness finds mission, it turns into passion, and then our restlessness now works to our advantage. Be restless to see people discover the love of God. And this kind of restlessness is not restlessness, as I said, in angst, but it's a directed passion. It will direct your life. You're going to know what you're living for. That's my prayer for each of us. So, amen. Okay, so let's take a moment to just share with your neighbor just one point that you want to chew on and just kind of like it hit you, just one statement, either from the video, from the testimony, from this message, and then we're going to have a time of prayer, and then we'll close with a final song.